And now, the host of Quirks of Israel, Reverend Peter Faust.
Hello, thank you. Good to see you all. Thank you for coming today. Thank you. Oh, look at all your smiling faces. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Good to see you. Okay, well, welcome to episode 2 of the Quirks of Israel. Thank you, everyone. So good to be here. Today's topic is visiting Israel. This is going to be a cage fight. In one corner, we have ancient and modern. And in another corner, we have geography and people. We are going to spar between these two and look at the quirky side of Israel related to these contrasting topics that are all combined when you visit Israel. Thank you. Yes, you can go to Israel too. So let's start with ancient and modern. Because Israel is unique in this aspect when you examine other countries around the world, especially North America. Our country of Canada and the USA are not ancient countries, not even old countries. I mean, you drive down a street and you see a 100-year-old house still standing and people are like, oh my goodness, look, a 100-year-old house. Or you travel to Halifax and see the original buildings going back to the founding of Nova Scotia in 1749 and people's minds are almost blown, almost to the point of literally exploding. Wow, that's so old. I mean, apart from the Vikings, who made an attempt for Newfoundland and Labrador in the 11th century CE, the first European explorer to arrive by ship upon Canada's shores, sailing down the St. Lawrence, was a Frenchman named Samuel de Champlain in 1604, and that, to Canadians, is ancient history. Or take the voyage of the Mayflower in 1620, or the founding of the USA in 1776, and that seems old. Now, of course, there is a far older culture and community when one looks at the history of the First Nations peoples who were scattered across the continent in tribes prior to Europeans coming to their shores. But our countries, as they stand, are not old. Practically all countries in the world are quite recent, although they have preserved their ancient cultures and monuments of the past. Think of China, Japan, Egypt, Italy, Greece, Great Britain, and others. And so, too, can Israel fit nicely in the category of ancient world. Like China and Egypt. You see remnants around Israel that go back 4,000 years and older. I mean, there's a tree standing in Gush Etzion outside of Jerusalem that began growing when Christopher Columbus sailed the ocean blue in 1492. Pretty crazy. The roots of the olive trees in the Garden of Gethsemane are around 2,000 years. They found 2,000-year-old dates and wheat on Masada by the Dead Sea that when planted and grew, they could be harvested. In 1947, they found the Dead Sea Scrolls of the ancient Qumram community, thousands of parchments, and whole books of the Bible, some of them dating back 2 centuries before Jesus. Everywhere you look in Israel, you see ancient ruins, a past preserved and protected. I mean, a number of years back, the Jerusalem municipality tried to dig a new water plumbing line, and they uncovered the original pool of Silome, where the kings of Judah were anointed, and where the water ceremony during the Feast of Tabernacles took place. I mean, picture this. You could just picture a Jerusalem contractor. He has the permits, the crew, the equipment. He arrives and starts digging, and then his work is interrupted by a discovery. Naturally, he shakes his head, seeing his entire world crumble before him. Ugh! Another ancient water cistern. Ugh! A pot full of ancient coins. Another ossuary with some guy's bones in it. Whose bones? Joseph Caiaphas? Whatever. That guy probably owes on his pa's gas bill. Now I have to call the Israeli Antiquities Authority. It's basically as simple as that. And as this defeated, disheveled contractor watches the archaeologists jump excitedly up and down as they start mapping out the site, he can just imagine all the Bible scholars around the world fawning and oohing over his discovery, and all the seminary and Bible college students who will read about it and scan the pages of their Bibles. In his mind's eye, he sees the millions of interested Christians and Jews who will shake their heads and say, wow. Well, you know that same Jerusalem contractor I mentioned earlier? He only wanted to install a sewage pipe. Now you have global fanfare. The new discovery is on the front page of Biblical Archaeology or the Time magazine or National Geographic. Okay, it's impressive, but come on, give them a break, right? But along with ancient is the modern. What comes to mind? Now, Tel Aviv, as one thing, a city built just north of Jaffa, which just over a century ago was sand dunes, now sprawling a metropolis of over 1 million. If you count all the miniature cities flowing into one another from Tel Aviv, the heart. Go north, you have Herzliya, the Silicon Valley of Israel, with all the high-tech and startup headquarters of hundreds of innovative businesses in tech. Go further north, now you have Haifa and the MIT of Israel, the Technion. Israel is the global leader in solar technology. Startup companies only second to the US, the most educated nation per capita. And now you can drink seawater with their distilled technology. All of the water in Israel passes through sophisticated metering systems. Among the systems invented in Israel are drip irrigation, advanced filtration, advanced water leakage detection, rainwater collection and treatment systems, water security, and smart city technologies. The best chance of survival in an area of the world with limited water is to collect it, guard it, filter it properly, and process it. Israel's south is 60% desert. But when you harness the desert, you can bring about miracles. And Israel is full of miracles. Just look at history through the lens of modern day technology in which Israel has pursued, invested in, and exported to the world. Now, a century ago, Israel was rife with malaria-ridden swamps and quite depopulated compared to the amount of space and what the land could actually have held at the time. 100 years ago, you have around 600,000 people living in the land, predominantly Arabs, but you also have many Jews, mostly in cities, small and large, and hundreds of scattered villages, many of them considered by today's standards as third world conditions. Today, Israel's population is around 10 million and more are returning. There are people living in Israel from over 70 countries, a modern day miracle, and a land that literally responded to a returned people. Is God part of this? I think so. I know so, hey? Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. During the modern Aliyah movement, which started in the 1880s and brought in waves of Jewish immigrants in the pre-World War II years, the kibbutz and moshav movement was launched. What's a kibbutz or moshav, you might ask? Well, without splitting hairs, essentially they were Jewish communities of farmers and pioneers who immigrated from Europe and North Africa, who drained the swamps, cultivated and tilled the land, removed rocks and boulders, and basically pacified and harnessed a land that had been neglected by centuries through Turkish occupation. Even one of the top ecologists who specialized in global famines in the 1930s, Thomas Clay Loudermilk, great name, marveled at the ingenuity of the Jewish pioneers and their dedication, seeing how wonderfully it affected the entire region, even bringing in waves of Arab immigrants who sought work and a better quality of life. Even Winston Churchill gave it his rubber stamp of approval. With the swamps drained and fertile soil restored, the land responded in what today can only be described as a modern Garden of Eden. I mean, Israeli farmers are even growing fruit orchards and vineyards in the Negev desert. The Jewish National Fund, over the course of a century, has planted over 250 million trees. It has changed the ecosystem, and now hundreds of thousands of birds have readjusted their migratory patterns to fly over the land of Israel and catch their breath before they continue over the Himalayas as they once had. The land of milk and honey is flowing again. Thank you, stock audience. Oh, so good. Okay, well, Israel is quirky. Join me on episode 3 of the Quirks of Israel as we explore the diversity of my 3 favorite places in Israel: the Galilee, Central Israel, and the Negev Desert in the south. Israel is fascinating and quirky. Cheers and shalom.